The radio telescopes picked up the signal on a Tuesday morning. It was not random noise from a distant pulsar or the echo of some cosmic event. It was a message, clear and deliberate, repeating in mathematical sequences that could only mean one thing. Humanity was not alone. The world stopped. Every screen, every device, every billboard showed the same thing. Alien symbols scrolling across displays while scientists worked frantically to decode them. Within hours, the message was translated. It was an invitation. The Galactic Collective wanted to meet. 6 months later, their ships arrived. They came in massive vessels that hung in orbit like floating cities, blocking out the sun in places. 47 different species sent representatives. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that people had nightmares just from seeing their pictures. But they came in peace, they said. They came to welcome humanity into the galactic community. Captain Elena Vasquez was chosen to represent Earth's military forces during the negotiations. She was 42 years old, sharp-minded, and had spent 20 years in naval service. She stood in the United Nations Assembly Hall and watched as the alien delegates explained the galaxy's political structure. The collective was ancient, they said, thousands of years old. They maintained peace through cooperation and mutual benefit. But there was a problem. Earth sat on something called a convergence node. The alien scientists explained it with holograms and charts that made Elena's head hurt. Essentially, Earth's position in space created a natural shortcut for faster-than-light travel. Ships could jump from one side of the galaxy to the other if they used Earth as a midpoint. It was rare. Only 7 such nodes existed in known space. The collective needed it. Trade routes, military logistics, everything depended on these nodes. They were very sorry, but humanity would need to relocate. 10 years. They would provide the technology, help move every human to a new world. It would be wonderful, they promised. Better than Earth in many ways. The world exploded in rage. Protests filled every city. How dare they? Earth was humanity's birthplace, their home. No amount of alien technology was worth abandoning it. The governments refused. Negotiations became arguments. Arguments became threats. Elena saw it coming before most. She began quietly diverting resources, building ships in secret, training crews for deep space survival. When her superiors questioned her, she showed them the intelligence reports. The collective was moving warships into position. This was not a negotiation anymore. It was an ultimatum. The attack came 8 years after first contact. The collective claimed humanity had become aggressive, dangerous, unwilling to cooperate. They said it was a peacekeeping action. They were lying. The bombardment started at dawn in Beijing. Kinetic weapons dropped from orbit, turning the city into a crater in seconds. Then Mumbai. Then Mexico City, Moscow, Lagos, New York. The strikes were coordinated, simultaneous, devastating. Billions died in the first hour. Elena was aboard the Orbital Defense Station Washington when it happened. She watched the screens as Earth burned below. The defense platforms tried to fight back, but they were toys compared to collective warships. One by one, the stations were destroyed. She barely made it to an escape shuttle before her station was vaporized. The biological weapons came next. Engineered plagues that spread through the air, the water, the soil. Things that turned lungs to liquid and brains to mush. The collective wanted Earth intact, but they wanted humanity gone. They were efficient about it. Elena made it to the emergency rally point, an underground military complex in Colorado. What was left of Earth's leadership was there, along with thousands of soldiers and civilians. The reports came in like hammer blows. 90% casualties within 3 days. 95% by the end of the week. The atmosphere was poisoned. The oceans were toxic. Earth was dying and taking humanity with it. The escape plan was desperate. 12 ships had been completed in various hidden shipyards. Experimental vessels built with a mix of human engineering and stolen alien technology. They could barely fit 50,000 people total. From 8 billion to 50,000. Elena wanted to vomit every time she thought about it. The selection was brutal. Scientists, engineers, doctors, soldiers, young people who could have children. They took genetic samples, frozen embryos, seeds, data cores containing all of human knowledge. Everything they could save. Everyone else would die on Earth. Elena commanded the lead ship, the Retribution. It was a fitting name. As they broke orbit, she stood on the bridge and watched Earth shrink behind them. The planet was brown and gray now, wrapped in clouds of poison. Fires burned across entire continents. It looked like a picture of hell. 47,000 people escaped. The rest, 11 billion human beings, were dead or dying. The collective sent a final message. They regretted the unfortunate necessity. Humanity had been too stubborn. This was humanity's fault. They hoped other species would learn from this example. Elena recorded her response and set it to broadcast on repeat. Her face was stone, her voice cold as vacuum. She spoke directly to the collective leaders, to every species that had voted for this genocide. She promised them that humanity would remember. She promised them that humanity would return. She promised them that what they had done to Earth would be repaid in full measure. Then the Retribution and its sister ships jumped into dark space, into the empty regions between stars where even the collective did not go. Behind them, Earth continued to burn. Ahead of them was nothing but void and time. But Elena Vasquez had given her oath, and she would spend every remaining day of her life making sure humanity kept it. The galaxy thought humanity was extinct. The galaxy was very, very wrong. 50 years had passed since Earth burned. The collective had long stopped talking about humanity. In official records, humans were listed as extinct, a footnote in galactic history, a species that had refused to cooperate and paid the price. The Convergence node was now the busiest trade hub in known space. Massive stations orbited where Earth once hung, processing millions of tons of cargo daily. It was the heart of collective prosperity. Nobody talked about the ghosts. Investigator Krell was a Noxie, a species known for their patience and analytical minds. His people lived for 200 years on average, and Krell had spent 40 of his investigating crimes across collective space. He was good at his job. He noticed patterns that others missed. And lately he had been noticing a very disturbing pattern. Ships were disappearing. Not many, and not in any way that raised immediate alarm. A cargo hauler here, a survey vessel there. The collective was vast. Ships went missing sometimes. Space was dangerous. But Krell had been tracking these disappearances for 5 years, and he saw something nobody else did. They all vanished near the frontier, in systems that had once been surveyed by human exploration vessels before the extermination. The Collective Security Council dismissed his concerns. Probably pirates, they said. Maybe a new spatial anomaly. Nothing to worry about. But they gave him clearance to investigate anyway. Krell was thorough, annoying, and usually right. Better to let him chase his theories than have him file reports questioning their competence. What Krell found in the debris fields scared him. The ships had not been destroyed by pirates. The damage patterns were too precise, too clean. Reactor cores carefully removed. Life support systems surgically extracted. Weapon arrays stripped with professional efficiency. And always the crew compartments were open to vacuum. No survivors, no witnesses except once. Krell found a black box recorder that had somehow survived. The cargo ship's final moments were recorded in perfect clarity. The crew had been hauling medical supplies when something hit them. Not weapons fire, an electromagnetic pulse that fried their systems instantly, then boarding parties. The security cameras showed figures in advanced combat armor that did not match any known collective military design. They moved through the ship like they owned it, taking what they wanted, spacing the crew without hesitation. Before the recording ended, one of the figures had stopped in front of the camera. The armor was marked with a symbol that made Krell's blood run cold. It was burned into his memory from the history files. A circle representing Earth split down the middle with the words "We remember" in human script. Krell brought his evidence to the Security Council. He showed them the recordings, the analysis, the pattern of attacks. He told them the truth that they did not want to hear. Humanity had survived. Not only survived, but organized, armed, dangerous. The council members looked at each other with expressions ranging from disbelief to outright mockery. One of the Zetharian delegates actually laughed. Humans were extinct, he said. Everyone knew this. The extermination had been total. This was clearly some pirate group using human symbols to frighten people. The council advised Krell to focus on finding these pirates and stop wasting time on ghost stories. But Krell knew better. He had studied humans before the extermination. His doctoral thesis had been about human psychology and warfare. Humans were adaptable, creative, and absolutely vicious when threatened. If even a handful had survived, they would not simply hide. They would learn. They would grow. They would come back. The attacks continued. A research station went dark in the outer reach. When collective military arrived, they found it stripped clean. Every piece of equipment gone. Every researcher dead. On the main computer core, someone had left a message. Just 3 words in human English. For Earth's children, a mining colony on an asteroid reported strange sightings. Ships that appeared on sensors then vanished. Figures moving in the darkness beyond the lights. The colony administrator requested military protection. Before ships could arrive, the colony stopped transmitting. The rescue team found it abandoned. All the mining equipment, all the refined metals, all the weapons gone. The colonists had been loaded onto their own transport ship and set adrift toward the nearest inhabited system. They arrived 3 weeks later, traumatized and babbling about demons in human skin. The pattern was clear now. Humanity was hitting isolated targets, places far from collective military response. They were stealing technology, resources, weapons. They were learning how collective systems worked. And they were leaving messages. Always messages. Reminding the galaxy that Earth had existed, that billions had died, that someone remembered. Krell requested a full military task force to hunt these human remnants. The Council refused. They would not waste resources on what amounted to a minor piracy problem. They had more important concerns. Trade needed protection. Core worlds needed security. The frontier could look after itself. So Krell went alone. He tracked the attacks, predicted patterns, set traps. He was always one step behind. The humans were too smart, too cautious. They never hit the same type of target twice. They never stayed long enough to be caught. They were ghosts, and ghosts were very hard to kill. Then one night, in a dead system far from any trade route, Krell's ship received a transmission. It was audio only. A human voice speaking in heavily accented Galactic Common. The voice was female, old, tired. She said her name was Elena Vasquez. She said she remembered Krell from the first contact negotiations, back when humanity still had hope. She told him that humanity had survived. 47,000 souls scattered across 12 ships. They had hidden in places the collective thought were uninhabitable. They had adapted to life in the void. They had watched the galaxy build its prosperity on Earth's grave, and they had learned everything they needed to know. She told him this was just the beginning. Humanity was patient now. They had nothing but time. And eventually the galaxy would pay for every life lost, every child burned, every dream destroyed. Then the transmission ended. Krell sat in his ship, in the darkness between stars, and realized that the collective had made a terrible mistake. You could kill billions of humans, but if you left even one alive, even one with memory and purpose and rage, then you had not won. You had only delayed the revenge. The ghosts were real, and they were coming home. 120 years after Earth died, humanity numbered 3 million souls. They had built their civilization in the forgotten corners of space. Inside nebulae where sensors could not reach. On rogue planets that drifted between stars. In asteroid fields so dense that only human pilots dared navigate them. They called these places the hidden worlds, and they were beautiful in their own harsh way. The generation born in these places had never seen Earth except in old videos. They grew up in artificial gravity, breathing recycled air, learning to shoot before they learned to read. They called themselves the Ember Generation. Born from the ashes of humanity's funeral pyre, burning with purpose that their parents had carefully cultivated, Maya Chen was 23 years old and had never set foot on a planet. She had been born aboard the manufacturing station Forge, deep inside the Red Veil Nebula. Her parents had both died in a raiding mission when she was 12. She had cried for exactly 1 day, then enrolled in combat training. Now she was a pilot, one of the best, and she flew a ship called Spite. It was a small name for a small ship, but both had large amounts of anger built into them. The new warships were masterpieces of combined technology, human engineering and adaptability, merged with collective designs that humanity had stolen and improved. The ships were fast, heavily armed, and nearly invisible to collective sensors. They could strike from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. Humanity had built 300 of them over the past 30 years, and each one was crewed by people who had lost everything to the collective. Admiral Elena Vasquez was 162 years old. Medical technology had advanced considerably in the hidden years. Gene therapy, cybernetic enhancements, experimental procedures that the collective had not yet discovered. Elena was more machine than flesh now, but her mind was sharp as ever, and her hatred had not diminished by even a fraction. She stood on the bridge of the retribution, now a massive carrier ship instead of the desperate refugee vessel it had once been. Around her, the fleet assembled. 300 warships, 15 support carriers, 10,000 soldiers ready to deploy. It was a fraction of what the collective could field, but humanity was no longer fighting fair. The operation was called Reckoning. Maya had helped plan parts of it, working with thousands of other officers and strategists. The targets were spread across collective space. Infrastructure nodes, manufacturing centers, military academies, communication hubs, not civilian targets. Humanity remembered what it felt like to be the victims, but they would cripple the collective's ability to wage war, and they would do it all at once. Maya's target was a military supply depot in the Kordesh system. It was deep inside collective territory, heavily defended and supposedly impossible to raid. She loved impossible. Spite and 15 other ships jumped in at the system's edge, their stealth fields keeping them hidden. They drifted on minimal power, letting momentum carry them toward the depot. The collective guards never knew what hit them. The humans struck with electromagnetic pulses first, frying sensors and communications. Then came the missiles, precise strikes that destroyed weapon platforms and shield generators. By the time the depot's defenders realized they were under attack, human boarding teams were already inside. Maya led her squad through the corridors. They moved fast and silent, combat armor absorbing sound and masking heat signatures. The collective soldiers they encountered barely had time to raise weapons before being put down. Maya felt nothing killing them. These people had built their careers on humanity's grave. They deserved no mercy. The depot's commander tried to surrender. He was a Zatharian, same species that had laughed when Krell warned them about humanity's survival. Maya accepted his surrender, then had her people strip every weapon, every piece of equipment, every data core. They took everything that was not bolted down, and they took several things that were. The commander and his staff were locked in a conference room with enough air for 3 days. Someone would find them eventually. Before they left, Maya recorded a message and uploaded it to every system in the depot. Her face was uncovered, her voice clear. She identified herself as human, born in the hidden worlds, daughter of Earth's murdered billions. She told the collective that this was humanity's return. She told them that every species who had voted for Earth's extermination would pay the price. She told them that the ghosts were real, and they remembered everything. Across the galaxy, similar attacks happened simultaneously. Humanity hit 137 targets in a single night. The collective's military infrastructure was shattered. Supply lines were severed. Entire fleets found themselves without fuel, without ammunition, without spare parts. The raids were surgical, brutal, and absolutely terrifying to anyone watching. The collective could no longer pretend humanity was extinct. The evidence was everywhere. Human ships, human weapons, human soldiers. The Security Council called an emergency session. Species representatives screamed at each other, demanding explanations, assigning blame. How had humanity survived? How had they grown so powerful? Why had nobody noticed? Krell sat in the observer section and said nothing. He had noticed. He had warned them. They had not listened. Now they were paying for that mistake. The collective branded humanity as galactic terrorists. They mobilized their fleets, called up reserves, prepared for war. But they were fighting an enemy they could not find. Humanity would strike and disappear. They knew collective ship movements before the collective did, had infiltrated communication networks, had spies in places nobody suspected. Krell received another message from Elena Vasquez. This time it was a video call. She looked ancient, her face a mix of organic flesh and cybernetic enhancement, but her eyes were alive, burning with purpose. She told him that she remembered him from the first contact negotiations. He had been young then, had seemed uncomfortable with the collective's ultimatum. She said she had been watching his investigation over the years, appreciated his honesty. Then she offered him a choice. He could continue serving the collective, hunting humanity until one side or the other was destroyed. Or he could help humanity end this war properly, not with genocide but with justice. She could not promise he would be safe. His own people would call him traitor, but she could promise that if he helped, humanity would remember him as the one collective member who had tried to do the right thing. Krell looked at the screen for a long time. He thought about the past 120 years. He thought about the lies his government had told, the genocide they had committed, the innocent species they had threatened into compliance. He thought about what his own children would inherit if the collective remained in power. He told Elena Vasquez that he would need full intelligence access to collective military networks. He would need protection for his family. He would need assurances that humanity would not become the monsters the collective had been. Elena promised him nothing except honesty. Humanity would do what needed to be done. No more, no less. The collective would fall, but the galaxy would survive. Justice, not revenge. Punishment, not extinction. Krell made his choice. He sent Elena the access codes to collective military communications. He became humanity's inside agent, the one who would help bring down the empire that had murdered Earth. The war had truly begun, and the Ember generation was ready to burn everything down. 180 years after Earth burned, Operation Reckoning entered its final phase. Humanity had spent 6 decades preparing for this moment. Now they would strike at the heart of the collective, at the 47 homeworlds that had voted for genocide. All at once. All on the same day. The Revenants led the assault teams. They were the survivors from the original escape, the ones who had lived through Earth's death. Medical science had kept them alive. Cybernetics had made them stronger, and time had turned them into legends. Each Revenant commanded a strike force, and each one had personal reasons for what they were about to do. Commander Chen, Maya's grandfather, was 198 years old. 70% of his body was artificial now, but his mind was sharp and his aim was perfect. He led the assault on the Zetharian homeworld, the species whose delegate had laughed at Krell's warnings. Chen's team dropped from orbit in stealth pods, landing in the capital city at midnight. The Zetharian military headquarters never saw them coming. Chen and his soldiers moved through the building like death itself, disabling security, capturing officers, seizing control of the planetary defense network. By dawn, they held the entire military command structure hostage. Chen stood in the war room and broadcast a message to the planet below. He told them who he was, where he was from, and why he was there. He showed them videos of Earth burning, of the billions who died. He made them watch what their government had done. Admiral Elena Vasquez led the assault on the collective capital herself. At 210 years old, she was the oldest living human, more legend than person now. Her body was mostly cybernetic, her organs replaced, her bones reinforced. She could no longer remember what it felt like to be fully organic. But she remembered Earth perfectly. Every detail, every color, every smell. Memory was all she had left of home. The capital world was called Unity, a symbolic name for a place built on genocide. It housed the Collective Security Council, the representatives of all 47 species. It was the most heavily defended location in known space, with orbital platforms, shield generators, and 3 full military fleets in permanent station. Humanity hit it with everything. The attack began with electronic warfare. Krell's stolen access codes allowing human hackers to infiltrate the defense network. Platforms began firing on each other. Shields failed, communications went dark. In the confusion, the human fleet emerged from stealth and opened fire. The battle was vicious. Collective ships outnumbered human vessels 5-1, but humanity had better technology, better training, and burning motivation. Ship-to-ship combat raged across orbital space. The Retribution took dozens of hits, its armor scarred and scorched, but Elena kept pushing forward. She had one target and nothing would stop her from reaching it. Maya Chen flew spite through the chaos, her small ship dodging between capital vessels like a shark among whales. She and her squadron had one job: clear a path for the boarding teams. They launched missiles at point-blank range, taking out weapon arrays and engine clusters. Several of her squadron died in the opening minutes, but the survivors pressed on. For Earth. Always for Earth. The landing parties hit the council chambers from 6 different directions. Elena led from the front, her powered armor turning her into a walking tank. Collective guards tried to stop them and died by the dozens. Security barriers were blown apart. Defense turrets were destroyed. Nothing mattered except reaching the council. They found the representatives in the central chamber cowering behind their seats. 47 species, the same ones who had voted to exterminate humanity. Elena walked through the chamber slowly, her footsteps echoing. She was broadcasting this across every network in the galaxy. Everyone would see. Everyone would know. She removed her helmet. Her face was mostly mechanical now, but her eyes were human. She looked at each representative in turn, naming their species, naming the delegate who had voted for Earth's destruction. Some tried to speak to defend themselves. She did not let them. She just recited the numbers. 8,300,742,916. The population of Earth on the day they had voted to kill it. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human forces seized control of military installations, government centers, communication hubs. They did not kill civilians. They did not bomb cities. They simply dismantled the ability of the collective to wage war. Weapons were destroyed. Ships were disabled. Military academies were shut down. The collective military tried to fight back, but they were leaderless, confused, sabotaged from within by Krell and his network of sympathizers. Entire fleets received false orders and jumped to empty systems. Supply convoys were redirected. Reinforcements never arrived where they were needed. Krell worked from a hidden station, coordinating the sabotage while protecting his family. He had smuggled them out weeks ago, hidden them in a human settlement. His wife had been furious at first until he showed her the truth of what the collective had done. Now she helped him, translating communications and predicting collective responses. His children were safe. That was all that mattered. The war lasted 6 months. Not because the collective could mount an effective defense, but because humanity took their time. They were methodical, thorough, making sure every military asset was neutralized. They accepted surrenders. They took prisoners. They treated wounded enemies. They were not the collective. They would not become monsters to defeat monsters. Species began to fracture away from the collective. Some declared neutrality. Others sued for peace individually. A few tried to blame other species, claiming they had been forced to vote for Earth's extermination. Elena did not care about excuses. Every species that had voted was occupied, their military dismantled, their weapons taken. Maya found her grandfather on the Zytharian homeworld after the surrender. He was sitting in the council chambers looking tired. She sat next to him and they said nothing for a long time. What was there to say? They had won, but Earth was still dead. They had justice, but it felt hollow. Commander Chen finally spoke. He said he remembered Maya's grandmother, who had died in the escape from Earth. He said she would be proud of what Maya had become. Maya said she hoped so, but she was not sure anymore. They had become soldiers, fighters, killers. Was that something to be proud of? Chen said that humanity had been given a choice. Die quietly or survive and make the galaxy remember. They had chosen survival. They had chosen memory. If that required becoming hard, becoming dangerous, then that was the price. But they had not become evil. They had not committed genocide. They had brought justice, not extinction. That mattered. Elena stood before the collective council and delivered humanity's terms. Complete military disarmament across all 47 species. Technology transfers. Resources for rebuilding. And most importantly, the convergence node would be returned to humanity. The galaxy would never again threaten another species with extermination, or humanity would return. The council had no choice. They agreed to everything. The collective as a political entity was dissolved. The species would remain independent, negotiate their own treaties, build their own futures. The galaxy would have to learn to coexist without a central power forcing compliance. Elena transmitted one final message to all of human space. The war was over. They had won. Earth was avenged. Now began the harder task: rebuilding, remembering, making sure this never happened again. She told them to be proud, to honor the dead, to never forget, but also to never become the thing they had fought against. Then Admiral Elena Vasquez, last survivor of Earth's final day, announced her retirement. She was going home, or what was left of it. The legend was ready to rest. 200 years after Earth died, the galaxy was a different place. The collective was gone, shattered into its component species. Some rebuilt peacefully. Others fell into civil war. A few thrived better than they ever had under collective rule. Humanity watched from the shadows, ready to intervene if anyone threatened genocide again. So far, nobody had been that stupid. The convergence node was human territory now. The massive trading stations had been dismantled. The commercial traffic was gone. In their place, humanity built something different. Orbital shipyards, defense platforms, and at the center, visible from space, a monument. A sphere of metal inscribed with 8 billion names. Every person who died when Earth burned. It took up an entire orbit and it would remain there forever. Elena Vasquez stood on the surface of Earth for the first time in 2 centuries. The planet was still dead, its atmosphere thin and poisonous, its surface scarred and barren. But human engineers had been working for 20 years, and the terraforming had begun. It would take 1,000 years to restore Earth to what it had been. Maybe longer, but humanity had patience now. They had learned to think in centuries. She walked slowly across the gray dirt, her powered suit protecting her from the toxic air. Behind her, a small ship waited. Nobody else had come. This was something she needed to do alone. In her hand, she carried a small container. Inside was a sapling, barely 6 inches tall, grown from seeds that had been carried aboard the Retribution during the escape. It was a sequoia, one of Earth's oldest tree species, perhaps the last one in existence. The terraforming had created small pockets where the soil was rich enough, where the air was clean enough, where something might grow. Elena had chosen a spot carefully. It was near where San Francisco had once stood, before the bombardment turned it to glass. She dug with her armored hands, making a hole deep enough, wide enough. She placed the sapling carefully, covered its roots, watered it with purified water from her suit's supply. She knelt there for a long time, looking at the tiny tree. It seemed so fragile, so impossibly small against the vast deadness of Earth. But it was alive. It was growing. It was hope in physical form. Maya Chen arrived as Elena was finishing. She had insisted on coming, though Elena had told her not to. Maya was 73 now, her own body starting to show the modifications that would keep her alive for another century. She would be one of the new revenants, the guardians who would watch over humanity's future. Maya stood next to Elena and looked at the sapling. She asked if Elena thought it would survive. Elena said she did not know. Maybe yes, maybe no, but they had to try. That was what it meant to be human. You tried even when the odds were impossible, especially when the odds were impossible. They talked about what came next. The hidden worlds were being opened up, turned into proper colonies. The population was growing steadily. In another century, there might be 1 billion humans again. In another 1,000 years, maybe more. Humanity would spread across the stars, would build new civilizations, would thrive. But Earth would always be home. This dead rock, this poisoned sphere, this grave of billions. It was where humanity began. And someday, when the terraforming was complete, it would be where humanity remembered its roots. Every human child would come here, would see the monument, would learn what their species had survived. Krell had sent a message. He was old now, his 200-year lifespan nearly complete. He had spent the last 20 years writing. His book was titled The Price of Extinction, and it detailed everything the collective had done, every lie they had told, every species they had threatened. It was required reading in dozens of school systems now. Future generations would know the truth. He had also written about humanity, about their survival, their adaptation, their justice. He called them the galaxy's conscience. The species that would not let genocide be forgotten. Some species hated the book. Others used it to justify their own independence from old power structures. Krell did not care either way. He had written the truth. That was all that mattered. Elena told Maya about the old world, about what Earth had been like before. The oceans that had covered 70% of the surface. The forests that had stretched for thousands of miles. The cities that had glowed at night like jewels. The billions of people living their lives, dreaming their dreams, never knowing that the stars held death. Maya listened and tried to imagine it. She had grown up in asteroid bases and nebula stations. Earth was just a concept to her generation, a place from history. But she understood why it mattered. This was where humanity had learned to dream, to hope, to reach for the impossible. This was the foundation of everything that came after. As the sun set, casting red light across the barren landscape, Elena felt something she had not felt in 200 years. Peace. Not happiness, not joy. She had lost too much for those emotions. But peace, the kind that came from finishing a task, from keeping a promise, from knowing you had done everything possible. She told Maya she was tired. Not just physically, though her body was failing despite all the augmentation, tired in her soul. She had lived for revenge, for justice, for the memory of the dead. She had accomplished everything she had set out to do. The galaxy remembered Earth now. The galaxy feared what happened when you tried to exterminate humanity. Her oath was fulfilled, Maya understood. She helped Elena back to the ship, helped her settle into the medical pod that would keep her comfortable. Elena asked for one favor. When she died, she wanted her ashes spread here near the sapling. She wanted to be part of Earth's rebirth, however long it took, Maya promised. Then she sat with Elena, holding the old woman's hand as the life support system slowly shut down. Elena's last words were simple. We remembered. We returned. We won. Then she was gone. Maya sat for a long time in the silence. Then she went outside and looked at the sapling again. It was such a small thing. One tiny tree on a dead world. But it was alive, and that meant Earth was not completely gone. Not yet. Not ever, if humanity had anything to say about it. 1,000 years later, the tree had grown massive. Its branches stretched hundreds of feet into the air. Its roots dug deep into soil that was rich and alive again. Around it, a city had grown. Not like the old cities, but something new. Something uniquely human. Buildings that grew organically from the ground. Gardens on every level. Technology and nature merged seamlessly. Children played in the tree's shade. They climbed its branches, carved their names in its bark, hung swings from its limbs. They learned about Admiral Elena Vasquez in school, about the Ember Generation, about the 200 years of exile and war. They knew the stories, honored the dead, remembered the oath, but they also lived. They laughed, they loved, they dreamed. They looked up at the stars not with fear, but with curiosity. They knew that humanity had paid a terrible price for reaching toward the cosmos, but they also knew that the price had been worth it, because they were here. They existed. They thrived. In orbit, the defense platforms maintained their silent watch. Veterans of the war, now grown old, taught new generations how to operate the weapons, just in case someone forgot the lesson, just in case another species looked at humanity and saw weakness instead of strength. But mostly, the platform stayed quiet. The galaxy had learned. When you tried to exterminate humanity, you did not succeed. You only created enemies who would never forget, never forgive, never stop until justice was served. Humanity had been called a myth once, dismissed as extinct, erased from history. Now they were legend, the species that died and returned, the ones who remembered Earth, the guardians who would never let genocide happen again. And in the shade of a massive tree, built from a tiny sapling planted by dying hands 2 centuries ago, children played and dreamed of stars. Earth lived again. Humanity lived again. The galaxy would never forget what it had done. And humanity would never let it.